And this is why someone who I work with closely, you all know, and see this all the time, week in and week out, is Jason's work, where this is what's underneath the tip of the iceberg. And Oliver, I know you've talked a little about his language as well, because just subtle shifts can give the tools that you're talking about, where you say to someone that I'm interested in white well-being, that doesn't automatically pit you against any other group. And if anyone attacks you on those grounds, they're revealing that they want the ill being. They want to hurt peoples of European descent. I know that word carries a bit of a different currency in the US versus Europe, but come on, we're just using it as a catch-all for people of European descent. And there are plenty of European people who are fine with using that term, or using victimizer instead of enemy. If you have an enemy, you're just a belligerent in a battle. You might be just as culpable or more culpable of any kinds of crimes or ill intentions as an enemy. If you have a victimizer, especially in today's culture where the victim is put on the pedestal, then harm is being done to you, and you're simply the recipient of it passively. So this is what Jason does, and the work he calls going free, because you're going free of these mental cages, and he's giving you tools. So I'm really, I don't get involved in the dust-ups, but I'm getting less and less patient with people who keep asking, what is this? What is this doing? Why are you guys just philosophizing online? This is the ground on which we were manipulated. This is the ground on which you and your families were totally disoriented, as Oliver's been talking about. So this is the field on which we must retake things and change things and set new tools and new ways of seeing things to help our people now and help the coming generations. So this is the most essential thing.
He's attempting to reorient. He's saying, it's like the old story about a friend of mine tells me this, and I love this story, so I'm going to tell it again. Basically, if you watch some of these nature shows, and I think he had just seen the nature show, and he called me up, and we were talking about it one time this years ago. And he's like, what happens when the lion's out there, the male lion and maybe a handful of females, and they're surrounded by hyenas in the dark, and there are just scores and scores of these hyenas, and they're all yapping and distracting. And what's so interesting with hyenas? They have a matriarch. They don't have a dominant male. They have a dominant female. And they're out there in the darkness, yapping, yipping, yapping, making noise, trying to distract, darting in to try to strike here and there, but they don't want a direct confrontation because the lion is so powerful. What has to happen is the lion, the male lion in this case, he usually doesn't do a damn thing, just lounges around and the females do all the work. But in this specific case, he comes out and kicks ass and takes names. And how does he do it? Because in the midst of all the confusion, all the competing sounds, all the things that are supposed to distract and disorient, he focuses upon the female. That is the matriarch. And bam, out of the gate he comes. That wasn't dramatic enough. Now, bam, out of the gate he comes. He goes roaring forward, seizes the damn female matriarch in his jaws and snaps its spine. And the whole problem's gone. But it's like the Hydra heads, right? If you're distracted by all these different things, you can't get to
that's the heart of Hydra. So you're saying the female signals, the female voice is the signal that in that case represents a sonic heart of the Hydra.
No, I'm saying that the female is in charge, and it might not even be making sound. The lion will identify it by scent, presumably. But
I thought you were saying the female is making a sound and is giving a signal to all the others to make their orientation.
All the hyenas taken as a group are forming a sort of distracting chorus. And in the midst of that, the male lion must properly identify which one is the female and matriarch. And it may be through sound, it may be through scent, some other indicator that I'm not aware of. But it must unerringly identify that and break its spine in order to move on. And in that sense, we are kind of talking about orientation and not being distracted. And so, for example, when Jason just sort of comes forward and puts his hand on the table and sweeps everything to the left off of it and says, I don't care about any of this other terminology. Here's what you need to know. It's anti-white. That is fundamentally a kind of reorientation. And so It partakes of what I'm talking about. And it has value in many other ways too, but that's kind of the only real place that a parallel comes to mind. So he's out there in the land of arbitrariness, which is speech and language, but he's attempting to reintroduce points of orientation, landmarks that once again get people oriented. They're no longer disoriented. They know that they can ignore all this other chatter because right there is the thing that spine needs to be broken, which is avoiding recognition of the fact that, frankly, it's all just anti-white. And once that orientation returns, then you're in a position to make sense of everything around you. It's like you've been handed the golden thread in the labyrinth, right? Or you've got a lantern that you can hold up in order to expose the animal tracks on the ground as you hunt by night, if you will. So, yeah, it has to take place in the realm of language, this reorientation, I think, that is important, but it also needs to take place in this larger realm that I'm discussing. And I am not quite sure, this is still a work in progress, but I think these theoretical considerations are eventually going to come together. And as you were saying, Jared, sort of trickle down, they will yield understandings that can be applied and in answering the campaign of disorientation that's being inflicted upon us. So that's the gist. It's not all the way there, it's the bread's in the oven, but it's not quite done. But hopefully it's producing a smell of baking, which I always find calm and comforting, rather than bullshit, which I often produce as a scent when I go through my crazy ideas.
The bread metaphor, the bread baking metaphor being that what you're working through, or that these ideas are just not disseminated to a critical number of people yet.
No, they're not ready for fully for public consumption. This is more the discussing. Think of this as being a discussion, much like a dirtbag like Marcuse must have had with his fellow revolutionaries before it all got written down.
In a specific case of what Jason's doing with the going free lexicon and that mindset, that's already out there and it's working. So it doesn't matter now. In fact, it's a good thing to reverse engineer it and let people know why it's working and what's underneath the tip of the iceberg.
Yes, but in this case, it's in your heads now, and it's in anybody who's been listening to these and will now think about it and apply it. Yes, and this is what I have managed to work through. And it's just a beginning. There's more that I'm not discussing because it's not entirely there, but it has to do with neurobiology and place and border and boundary cells, and some recent discoveries related to the parts of the brain that are related, sort of adjacent to the hippocampus and have to do with memory and spatial orientation. There's all sorts of additional stuff that I'm working on, and they will not catch me. I am not the. They have a lot of very intelligent people, but I feel equal to dealing with them, and they're going to be behind me. It's like,
this is our revelation of the method, folks.
Pardon me?
No, I'm just joking. I'm saying this is our revelation of the method.
Right, indeed.
I guess, yeah. This is more like,
we're actually live streaming a meeting of an otherwise secret society.
Yeah, the gist is that, but then I'll keep it very brief. There's much more out there that can be applied, and if you're worried by the fact that they will see this and employ it, you have to remember that they're true believers. They do worship the dialectic. They do think it all comes down to language. They do think it can all be socially engineered. They would have to be different people with an entirely different set of beliefs to fully grasp and apply the things that, maybe if they're not coming out now, will one day come out of what I'm trying to think about. It's like, try to come up with a weapon. I don't need to go there. I said I'd keep it short. If you've got somebody who's fundamentally Manichaean and dualistic, and then you've got a way to step around them that involves monotheism, they can't let go of their own framework. They literally can't let go of it. It would change who and what they are to fully see and grasp the things that I'm talking about. as an assumption to understand what I'm talking about, you have to recognize that man is not entirely divorced from animals, and that we are instinctive, and that a biological sex matters, and that there can be no complete, there can be incremental, perhaps utopian social engineering, but no complete break from all that has come before. I mean, they would literally have to accept, and not just superficially, but fully within themselves, accept and take into themselves these other ways of looking at things. And that it's just not going to happen, man. It's not going to happen. People are so shockingly ingrained with how they approach things, the majority of them, that, yeah, I'm not worried about it.